Convicted felon Donald Trump is destroying the White House and its 233-year history. So is any of this legal? Who is paying for it, and who can go to jail for its demolition? Get your copy of Red Hats, a pocket guidebook listing over 1,000 companies that support the convicted felon Donald Trump, along with Make Lying Wrong Again hats and pins, stickers, and Trump library signs at ProfessorPride.com. The White House at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. has over 233 years of history lining its halls. Overall, it's a 55,000 square foot building that cost taxpayers $232,371, and this is a 1/106 scale model of what it looked like just 2 weeks ago. On October 13th, 1792, construction began on building the People's House, the main building here in the center. It was designed by Irish-American architect James Hoban, who also designed the U.S. Capitol building, but the White House was majorly constructed by African-American slaves. Construction was completed in 1800, but when President Thomas Jefferson first started using it in 1801, they added these colonnades to each side of the building, which are covered pathways to allow horse-drawn carriages to pull right up to the building without guests getting wet from the rain, and allow staff access to the horse stables that used to be on either side. These would later be turned into actual hallways with offices on either side, but at the time they were just columns with a roof overhead. The building was set on fire by British forces during the War of 1812. This fire ruined much of the exterior and destroyed everything inside. But reconstruction began immediately because this office building was the symbol of our country's strength. The south portico here on the back and north portico here on the front were added in 1824 and 1829 respectively. That's these columns here on the front and these columns here on the back, which were mostly used for welcoming highly respected guests into the White House. In 1901, things were starting to get really crowded inside of this one building, especially considering everyone had to work in such a small space. Remember, an entire branch of our government had to fit inside of this one building. These two sides did not exist yet. So President Theodore Roosevelt got permission from Congress to add the West Wing over here, where his offices will be located. In 1909, President William Howard Taft created the first Oval Office, again with congressional approval. In 1913, First Lady Ellen Wilson, wife of President Woodrow Wilson, installed the White House Rose Garden outside of the Oval Office right about there. The third floor of the main building was converted into a living quarters for the president in 1927. In 1935, President Franklin D. Roosevelt added cast iron furniture to the Rose Garden, so guests could enjoy the garden more. By 1942, Congress determined that there needed to be some extra precautions for the president in case of emergencies, especially as we entered World War II. So they authorized the construction of a bunker deep below the surface of the White House. The only problem with that is, you certainly don't want your enemies to know that you're building a bunker. So they first built the entire east wing of the White House to cover up what was happening inside and underground. That means the entire east wing was originally empty inside, leaving room for construction to dig underground. By 1946, additional office spaces were needed, so they created office spaces inside of that empty space and created ballrooms to hold state dinners. Just 2 years later, the main building's load-bearing walls were found to be constructed of wooden beams that were close to failing. So, under President Harry Truman, those walls were dismantled and reconstructed using steel frames. During this same time, they added the Truman Balcony. In 1981, under President John F. Kennedy, the Rose Garden was redesigned a little, with a few extra trees. And in 2009, Michelle Obama, wife of President Barack Obama, expanded the garden a little with a White House kitchen garden to help show kids how to eat healthier, plus supply the kitchen of the White House with fresh vegetables for state dinners. Overall, according to public records, it cost just $232,000 to build the entire White House. Adjusted for inflation, this would be about $4.3 million today. The only exceptions to this would be the bunker underground and any additional security measures put in the building since then by the Secret Service, all of which are considered black budget projects for security reasons. Nowadays, if you go to the official White House website under the control of Donald Trump, you can see a timeline of major events, including all of the construction projects I mentioned a moment ago. But if you scroll through that list, you'll suddenly see a shift from the building's history to political mudslinging and slander against Trump's political enemies. Trump wants you to know that in 1998, President Bill Clinton was impeached for having an affair with Monica Lewinsky in the White House. Conveniently, he forgot to mention that Trump himself got impeached twice during his first term, one of which was for committing treason on our country. He also fails to mention that while Clinton did have an affair, it was a consensual one. But Trump was found guilty of raping women without their consent, so he's certainly not on any moral high ground to speak here. Trump also wants you to know that President Obama met with members of the Muslim Brotherhood in the White House in 2012, even calling the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization. But Trump fails to mention that they were not classified as a terrorist group until Trump's first term in office, after Obama already left. And after they were a terrorist group in 2019, Trump invited the same people to the White House too. Trump also fails to mention how he invited terrorist organizations like Hamas and the Taliban to the White House and Camp David. In fact, with Trump being such good friends with so many dictators and terrorist groups, I wonder why it was President Obama who got a Nobel Peace Prize for his work. Trump finds it important to mention that in 2023, a bag of cocaine was discovered outside of the White House during President Biden's term in office. But Trump fails to mention how this small bag was found in an area of the White House which welcomes visitors to tour the building. Not to mention, President Biden and his entire family, including his son Hunter, were staying at Camp David around the time the bag was found. So it was clearly not their drugs. Another important event Trump wants you to know about was in 2023, when President Biden hosted an event for Trans Day of Visibility at the White House, on the same day as Easter that year. But you should know that Trans Day of Visibility is always on the same date every year, March 31st, and Easter changes. So it fell on the same day, but trans people own that date first. Secondly, to showcase Trans Day of Visibility, Trump uses a trans slur, and he uses a picture of a topless woman appearing in front of the White House. But you should know this is photoshopped to make it appear that she is closer to the White House than she actually was. In actuality, this photo was taken in June, not on Trans Day of Visibility in March, and it was actually taken outside of the White House in a political stunt the Biden administration condemned at the time. But that didn't stop Trump from photoshopping her inside of the White House for this website timeline of major events. Today, the White House is managed by the National Park Service and is marked as a historic landmark. This means any changes must be approved by many offices before any construction can begin on anything. Obviously, some minor changes are normal. Every president begins their term choosing paintings or sculptures on loan from the White House collection, the Smithsonian, or the National Gallery of Art. This allows a president to showcase the White House in their own personal style. But all of these pieces are simply on loan and must be returned when they leave office. Any construction to the White House must be proposed by the Office of the Curator and the White House Facilities Management Division to the National Park Service for approval. That application is reviewed by the Park Service to ensure that it's in compliance with Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act and the D.C. State Historic Preservation Office. Once those two groups find the application in compliance with the law, the application goes to the National Capital Planning Commission to evaluate the design, planning, and environmental impacts under the National Environmental Policy Act. This goes alongside opportunities for public comment on the design and impacts of the construction. Once a design or change to the White House is determined not to cause any environmental disruption and is in compliance with Section 106, it moves on to the U.S. Commission of Fine Arts for review. They process the application to ensure it doesn't change the existing structure, for instance, destroying the entire East Wing. And they modify the design if needed to ensure it matches what is already there. Just as we were editing this episode, Trump fired all 6 members of the U.S. Commission of Fine Arts. They are the only agency in this entire chain who can stop a president from destroying what is already there, or change their design before it gets built. And he just fired all 6 of them. So this 8th step in the process no longer exists. Finally, it gets sent to the Congressional Office on Budget Oversight to approve of the budget of the entire project. And yes, this means any construction to the White House is controlled by taxpayer funding. Once the application, including blueprint designs, are approved by all of these agencies, then and only then can the White House Chief Usher and Facilities Management Office start any demolition or construction. During all of this, the National Park Service holds onto the money for the project since the building is officially a national park site. And for the record, all presidents in the past, including Trump in his first term, went through all of these agencies for any change to the White House. But in May 2019, during Trump's first term, First Lady Melania Trump renovated the Rose Garden back here by installing a limestone walkway around it, which was now 36 inches wide, to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act. Arguably a good change to make. But then she removed all of the flowers and trees to plant a grass field over almost everything else. She also was in charge of building a 1,200 square foot tennis pavilion on the south lawn, somewhere about there. In June 2025, convicted felon Donald Trump installed 2 100-foot tall flagpoles at the White House, one on the north lawn and one on the south lawn. They each cost $50,000, and reportedly, Trump purchased them himself from a company in Plano, Texas, called U.S. Flag and Flagpole Supply. It markets itself as a small business owned by Ginger Keene, who, according to her LinkedIn page, started this small business in December 2017. And wow, just 8 years later she's working for the president? But you should know that Ginger is not what she claims to be. Not only did U.S. Flag and Flagpole Supply Company reportedly go from annual sales of less than $1 million per year to $12 million so far this year, but Ginger also happens to be the vice president of Concord Industries since June 2003. That business makes flag and flagpoles too, and is located just 22 minutes away from her other company. But according to the Federal Elections Commission, or FEC, they reportedly have a super PAC that's been known to donate to Republican candidates. Just 1 month later, Donald Trump ordered the grass field of the Rose Garden to be completely paved over with limestone tiles from Indiana Limestone. That company is owned by Polycor Incorporated, which is owned by Birch Hill Equity Partners, a private equity firm that reportedly donates to conservatives too. Lighting fixtures were also installed in the new patio, which were criticized at the time by a multitude of the agencies we listed a moment ago as disrupting the historical atmosphere of the White House. But this new patio was later used in September 2025 as a meeting place for what Trump calls the Rose Garden Club. This exclusive club is made up of Republican senators, congresspeople, and lobbyists who joined Trump for lunch. Also in September 2025, Trump proposed an archway he calls the Independence Arch, which would be constructed at the end of the Arlington Memorial Bridge. As of this taping, construction has luckily not begun on this project yet, but the main design features 4 giant columns and even an eagle looking left. And if you history buffs out there have alarm bells going off right now, you're not going crazy. Trump's arch design is based on the Triumphal Arch, which Adolf Hitler planned to build in Berlin before the Nazis lost the war. Considering the location of this proposed arch would be next to the Arlington National Cemetery, a place where 400,000 soldiers are buried, 8,466 of which fought the Nazis in World War II, this arch would be the biggest sign of disrespect to their legacy and to our country yet. But don't worry, all 6 members of the U.S. Commission of Fine Arts were just fired, so it will probably be built soon and his fans will just cheer it on. On October 20th, 2025, nearly 233 years to the day from when it was first built, Trump ordered Clark Construction Group LLC to demolish the entire east wing of the White House. To be fair, Clark Construction has been a government contractor since the 1990s, with 99.41% of their revenue coming from the U.S. government in some form. In total, taxpayers paid them $5.9 billion since 2008, with 35% of that, meaning $2.08 billion, being awarded to them in the last year alone. So they are no stranger to government contracts. What's new for them is doing construction without apparently having authorized government permits. Reportedly, none of the organizations we listed at the top of this episode approved of the demolition of the East Wing of the White House. Trump even said that the construction of this ballroom will not touch or interfere with the current East Wing. But as it stands now, the entire East Wing is demolished and gone. It's the worst renovation to the White House since the British renovation of 1812. But hey, at least the British didn't take all the rubble and build a golf course. And yes, Trump is seriously taking the White House rubble and building a golf course. Welcome to the darkest timeline, my friends. There is a federal law which could send each of these construction workers to jail and face heavy fines for doing a project on the White House without these permits in place. But seeing that it would be the job of Trump's controlled DOJ to charge them of the crime, it's likely they will never face any legal consequences for destroying the White House. It would only be if Congress forced their hand that anything would be done to stop this destruction. That begs the question, what will replace it? Well, that is a 90,000 square foot ballroom capable of holding events with 1,000 people. By the way, this is completely to scale. It's an event space larger than any president or event has ever needed in the past, and when complete, it will be larger than the entire White House, the West Wing, and the old East Wing combined. In fact, after we got done building this entire scale model this weekend, we realized the entire White House can pretty much fit inside of the new ballroom. So is any of this legal? Trump claims that there is an exemption to the Section 106 law that allows him to do all of this construction without congressional oversight or approval from the National Park Service. That exemption he claims to have is called Section 107, which states each branch of government controls its own seat of power. In the past, Section 107 was used for minor things, such as how many tours go through the White House every day, what items visitors can bring with them on a tour of the Capitol building, and so on. For example, the President and Congress cannot decide whether or not the Supreme Court allows a hearing to be video recorded. That's up to the Supreme Court to determine for themselves. The spirit of the law is meant to allow each branch to control their own minor rules, not the complete demolition and construction of government buildings that taxpayers paid for. But leave it to Trump to exploit a decades-old loophole to do whatever the hell he wants. To be fair, Trump says there's actually precedent here for this. Precedent, not to be confused with president here, means an earlier event or action that is regarded as an example or guide to be considered. Basically, if something was allowed to happen before, the court has to allow it to happen again unless Congress stepped in to make a new law or something. Now, because you cannot legally say something is a precedent from your current term, Trump is claiming the earlier event, which allows him to tear down the entire East Wing of the White House this week, comes from May 2019, when the First Lady tore out the Rose Garden to put in a grass field. But who was president in May 2019? And for those who don't get that subtle humor here, it was Donald Trump. So he's literally using himself as a precedent here, saying he was allowed to tear out flowers from the Rose Garden before, so why should we stop him now from tearing down half the White House? So how much will all of this cost? Well, officially we don't know because no budget was ever submitted for approval to anyone, and no official records are being published as of this taping. But you should know that Trump said the project would originally cost $200 million. After just 1 week into the demolition, it is already ballooned to over $350 million. To be fair, Trump says that presidents for the past 150 years have requested an event space large enough to hold 1,000 people for lavish parties, even though there's no record of any such request by any president, including Trump in his first term. You should also know the two largest events ever held at the White House were done by Jimmy Carter in 1979 and President Biden's LGBTQ Pride Month celebration in 2023. So at best, they had to rent a couple of tents 2 times in our 249-year history. But numbers aside, it's great to see we're spending $350 million on a ballroom for rich parties While we have homeless people on the streets outside, 20% of children across the US go hungry every day, and the country is $38 trillion in debt with inflation hitting record highs. So who is paying for this project? The biggest donor currently is Alphabet Incorporated, which owns Google and YouTube. So hi, corporate daddies. They are paying $22 million for the project. Why? Well, after Trump committed treason and attacked our Capitol on January 6, 2021, YouTube suspended Trump's YouTube channel, claiming he violated their private company's terms of service, which all creators like myself and Donald Trump have to adhere to in order to remain on their platform. But by committing treason and using his YouTube channel to promote violence, Trump clearly broke those terms of service. So YouTube suspended his channel and Trump sued them. Rather than fighting it out in court and winning in a landslide because courts have time and again ruled that the government cannot tell private companies how to police their own terms and conditions, Google opted to settle with Trump out of court and pay him $22 million for this ballroom. Other donors include Altria Group Incorporated, which is a tobacco company, Amazon, Apple Computers, Booz Allen Hamilton, a cybersecurity company, Caterpillar, who builds construction equipment like excavators, but please, no one email business practices at cat.com to tell them they just paid millions of dollars to fund a construction project when the crew that they're paying is using their rival Volvo excavators to do the work. Coinbase, a platform for sketchy cryptocurrency markets. Comcast Corporation, which owns cable companies. J. Peep and Amelia Fanjul, who owns sugar companies. Hard Rock International, which operates Hard Rock restaurants. HP Incorporated, which is a computer company. Lockheed Martin, a military contractor. Meta Platforms, which owns Facebook and Instagram. Micron Technology, a data storage company. Microsoft, which also builds computers. Next Era Energy Incorporated. Palantir Technologies Incorporated, which collects personal data from the IRS and other government agencies for what they claim are completely harmless reasons. Ripple, another cryptocurrency company. Reynolds American, another tobacco company. T-Mobile, a cell phone company. Tether America, another cryptocurrency company. Union Pacific Railroad. Adelson Family Foundation, which also supported Trump during his election campaigns. Stefan E. Brody, who co-owns a water purification company. Betty Wold Johnson Foundation from the Johnson & Johnson companies. Charles and Marissa Cascarilla, another cryptocurrency company owner. Edward and Sherry Glazer, who are real estate investors. Harold Hamm, who owns an oil company. Benjamin Leon Jr., who founded a company providing medical centers for seniors in Miami, Florida. The Lutnick family, who owns an investment bank and who also serves as Trump's Secretary of Commerce. The Laura and Isaac Perlmutter Foundation, who owns Marvel Entertainment. Stephen A. Schwartzman, another investment banker. Konstantin Sokolov, who is a private equity investment banker born in the Soviet Union and now works in America, but definitely does not have any ties to a man by the same name who was a former Russian agent. It's totally not the same guy. They were just born in the same area during the same time, and now one is investing in a White House construction project under a man investigated for being a Russian spy president. Kelly Loeffler and Jeff Sprecher, who are billionaires. Kelly serves as the administrator of the Small Business Administration, and Jeff serves as the chairman of the New York Stock Exchange, because nothing says small business like billionaires who chair the stock exchange. Paolo Terramani, who owns 150 technology patents. Cameron and Tyler Winklevoss, another set of cryptocurrency company owners. Overall, their combined contributions are set to make up just 10% of the money needed to pay for the construction. As of this taping, it's unclear where the other 90% will come from because the White House has yet to release any blueprints or budget for the project. But one thing is clear. Over the past 10 years, Donald Trump has been acting like our White House is just a Lego set. He's been dismantling our morals and its foundation, one flagpole, one tennis pavilion, one paving over the Rose Garden, one Russian f***ing monstrosity, and one brick at a time. We can sit here and complain about policies we don't agree with or executive overreach. We can even report how he's withholding funding from museums, schools, healthcare and local hospitals, and school lunch programs. But this East Wing project is far from the first time he's literally destroyed our White House and the 233 years of history that it contains. He's put up massive flagpoles to block our view of our house. By the way, these are to scale. He's put up fences to stop people from protesting outside. He's paved over our Rose Garden so he can have meetings with his donors. and now he's destroyed an entire part of our history in the East Wing. It's clear to us that he will not stop until that history is all gone. The only option we have is to call on our Congress to impeach him and put him behind bars immediately before he gets bored filling his website with slander and dismantling this White House brick by brick, and decides to just demolish our country once and for all, which, by the way, he's already about halfway f***ing there. Get everything you need to protest the Felon-in-Chief, including pocket guidebooks, hats, pins, stickers, and digital downloads at ProfessorPride.com. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and click on this video to continue enjoying our show.